I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Rachel, and this is Neurodivergent Voices, the podcast amplifying the voices and lived experience of the neurodivergent community.
We're licensed occupational therapists who specialize in the brain and are neurodivergent ourselves. Join us so often in this podcast that is for you and by you, the neurodivergent community.
If you're interested in learning more about neurodiversity and joining a vibrant community of neuro-inclusive adults, head to our website, divergecommunity.com.
Interested in an interview? Email divergecs@gmail.com to get it scheduled. Let's get to it.
All right. Hello.
Hello again.
Hi.
I'm Rachel.
Stephanie.
I'm Liz.
Liz, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Neurodivergent Voices interview. We are really excited to see where this talk takes us. So before we get started, would you mind telling us a brief visual description of yourself and where you're calling from?
Sure. I'm calling from Ontario, Canada. You can't really see it, but I'm in my dining room. I've got a white wall behind me. I'm a 36-year-old woman with dark brown hair tied in a ponytail, yellow shirt, tanned light brown skin, because I'm half from India and half from British ancestry, so I kind of have that mixed skin tone. Anyway, that's sidetracked.
Nice.
I'm
Steph?
Stephanie. I've got my dark glasses frames, my Edna mode glasses, I like to call them. I have my brown hair pretty loose with some red tint in this lighting specifically, with my peachy, we'll say peachy sweater on. That's really nice and comfy. So, and a nice blanket that I have in my lap. always need the comfort blanket.
Yeah. And I'm Rachel. Today I'm wearing a Diverge colored striped shirt and some earrings that make me really happy. They're little corgi earrings, and my hair is pulled back as usual. And I have my squishy as always, which I'll be using to help me stay focused and comfortable.
Mhm.
And I'm calling from Michigan.
Yep. Same. Liz, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and like what you like to spend your time doing?
Sure. So I'm an occupational therapist. I am pretty busy. I try to keep myself busy. So I'm a curler, especially in the winter. So I curl 2 nights a week in the winter. The curling is on right now. For those of you who follow curling, probably know that. I am a Toastmaster, so learning to improve my public speaking skills, which I'm still working on. You'll be able to tell by the number of times I say but I'm working on it. I have a mental illness, which is the whole reason why I wrote the book. So my book is called Resilient. It's about surviving my mental illness and becoming an occupational therapist despite losing my hearing and going through this whole huge, long mental health crisis. So I spend a lot of time now that that's published, actually doing like publicity and getting it out there, doing podcasts and things like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wonderful. I actually just I did curling for the second time in my whole life recently, and I really enjoyed it. And it's not something that is super big in the States. So but I could see myself really getting into it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's one of those things that's easy to pick up and hard to master.
I can definitely picture that. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I'm at the stage where I'm just trying to keep my balance as I glide out or cast out or however you call that. But excellent.
Slide out, yeah.
Slide.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Very good. Okay. So you kind of teased at your book, which is a big part of the reason we're interviewing today. And we have a lot of context about you that you so, graciously have shared with anyone who's able and willing to pick up the book and read it. And really, as other folks who experience mental illness are so grateful for your vulnerability and honesty in allowing kind of an inside look into what most people don't share publicly, or most people aren't aware of even happens. So grateful to have this open and candid conversation about it, and also hope that you can let us know when timeouts are needed, or if we are addressing something that is bringing discomfort or in a way that is not respectful or comfortable for you.
Yeah.
Please let us know. Yeah.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this podcast, Neurodivergent Voices, and we've just kind of alluded to mental illness as well, but how do you identify as neurodivergent? And you can share as much or as little as you feel comfortable with that.
Yeah. So my mental illness is a mix of bipolar 1 and psychosis. So it's called schizoaffective disorder, which is kind of a scary title for a lot of people because they don't know what it means, or they think, that they believe the stigma around it. So in terms of neurodivergent wise, I believe that mental illness falls under the category of neurodivergent. It's something that can come and go, but ultimately my brain is different. It does work differently. Even when I'm not having symptoms, my brain definitely still works differently to other people, whether that's something that's, been my whole life or up to the illness, I'm not sure. But I'm definitely don't think like the norm. So
Yeah. I think I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad you saw yourself in this podcast and reached out, because so often the narrative is about autism and ADHD, and a lot of acquired neurodivergence doesn't get the same sort of attention or dialogue around it. So
absolutely.
when did you start identifying with this term of neurodivergent? Like,
oh gosh, I'm not sure.
okay,
I'm not sure.
It's been a minute.
I couldn't give you time. I would say within the last couple of years, I guess,
Okay.
as it started to come out and kind of become more popular, and I heard it more, and I understood the concept of what it was about and how, like being, neuroaffirmative and things like that. And I thought I really connect with this, even though I don't, as far as I know, have ADHD or autism. I really I feel like this describes me. So
Yeah, absolutely. Just for our audience's sake, just a quick recap, that neurodivergence can be developmental or acquired, and it can be both too, right? People who have their brain develop in a different way can also experience acquired neurodivergence, such as mental illness, right? And folks whose brain develop typically can acquire mental illness as well, or other neurodivergence with time. So absolutely.
Yeah.
great recap.
Yeah. And it's also transient, which is a word that I know Rachel loves to use all the time. And so I'm stealing it from her vocabulary. But being able to recognize that sometimes it's with us and not always with us too, depending on TBIs and recovery and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned too, about it always affects the way in which my brain functions. I might not always be experiencing symptoms, or they might not always be, affecting my functioning, but it still affects the essence of who I am. So
yeah, definitely.
absolutely. So if it's okay, you had sent me some of the answers to these questions that you had thought about in advance. So is it okay if I ask you a little bit about
Sure.
something you didn't touch on here yet? Okay. So you had mentioned that you've always felt a little bit different. And you gave an example of one of the things that kind of made you notice or be mindful of that difference in the form of some jokes.
Mhm.
Oh yes, okay, I
Yeah.
remember now.
I thought
I
that
was
was
like,
good.
I don't
Yeah.
remember what I sent you. So one thing, you remember like 15 years ago, it was really big for people to make these yo mama jokes.
Mhm.
And I was in university at the time, and I had this friend group, and I was just completely incapable of doing a yo mama joke. And I would try, and everybody else would just break out laughing, not because I got the yo mama joke right, but just how wrong I had it. And I still, to this day, cannot figure those things out. So I'm very glad that that has gone out the window now. Maybe I'm just bringing it back by mentioning it, but so that's just like one of the things that's, kind of maybe a more easy to understand example that, it's I just don't get it. Like, it's my brain just works differently. I don't understand that, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's, it is what it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like to use a lot of expressions or sayings, and majority of the time I don't quite know what they mean, or I think I know what they mean and it's really off base. So I can relate in that aspect of like I wanna like try and fit in and understand, but sometimes I'm just not actually understanding.
Exactly,
Maybe that's a
right?
level of masking, but
I have the desire to fit in, but I don't have the skill set to do it at the same level as everybody else.
yeah,
Mhm.
right. And it comes at, I would assume, quite a bigger cost than it does for most too, to try and fit in when we don't have the skills or all of the skills. But
Yeah.
absolutely. So, what are some of your strengths? Things that you like about yourself or current hyperfixations, things that bring you joy?
So I like that I'm the kind of person that can teach myself pretty much anything. So right now I'm in a little bit of a depressive slump, so my brain is not working quite as easy as it usually is, but I can, you know, I taught myself how to switch adapt toys for kids at
Mhm.
Christmas. I taught myself how to write Arduino programming language because I wanted to build a light which changes colors depending on the time for like use in like therapy sessions. I taught myself, I can pretty much anything I put my mind to, and like you said, hyperfixate, go
Yeah.
down that rabbit hole, and then dig right in and right in until I am entranced in it and learning everything.
Mm, that's beautiful. Has writing been a passion of yours?
So writing, I never imagined myself as being a writer. So the book actually started to come about because I was in therapy and I was doing some trauma work, and one of the things my therapist recommended was to, try writing. And I was a little bit hesitant at first because journaling, if you, as you know, in the book, is a big part of my trauma. But
Mhm.
I decided one day I was hypomanic and my brain was going a million miles an hour and I just needed some way to get it out. So I started typing. And I typed out, and a lot of people are shocked at this one, 23,000 words in the first 24 hours.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. 23.
So an essay is usually like 1,500. Now, I'm
Okay.
not saying that they were
Yeah.
all great words,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but they were words on virtual paper, I guess you
Yeah.
can put it. So that's how fast my brain was going with information that needed to get out.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the book, I spent hours and hours and hours every day after work typing this book, editing this book, trying to get the book out there, finding a publisher. It was a lot of work. And I never pictured that that would be something that I would do, but
Mm,
it, as I like to say, it is what it is. I've done it, and I can't believe it. Like, it's just amazing.
yeah, absolutely. So for those of us who haven't, not us, we've read it, but for those of our listeners who haven't had the opportunity to read your book yet, would you mind providing like a brief overview or synopsis of your book for those who might be
Sure,
interested?
sure. So the goal of me writing the book was to help other people who've never been in my shoes or someone with mental illness shoes to understand what it's really like. I found that, my family didn't understand, my friends didn't understand, the hospital workers, they don't understand. So I started to write it out. And so it developed basically into 3 parts. My first part is in when I first got sick in my teenage years. And this one, I've been told, is very emotional and it's hard to read. It's talks about, first getting suicide and, psychosis and all sorts of not being treated well, and the journals that go along with that. And then that kind of wraps up, and I head into second part, which is, without giving spoilers, of course, it focuses on losing my hearing and getting through school. And then the third part is focused on after school, after graduation, how I'm coping with the illness, and managing to work and how my life works with that.
Mm.
So it's about my experience as an OT with schizoaffective disorder who's working and making things work.
Mm. I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Stephanie.
Oh, I was gonna say I have not finished it because some parts in it have been like self-triggering. But the parts I have read, which is still about 75% of the book, I highly recommend for anyone, just because it is such a good insight of like even the like part 1 with some of the medical system and whatnot, and how it kind of puts us in your shoes and seeing how things are being handled or were being handled and probably still are being handled in some capacity. So I definitely applaud you for bringing light to that, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, including those that are working with individuals on a daily basis.
Yeah. I think, even people who work in like day to day, as you said, with people with mental illness, I always try to, encourage them to read the book, because yes, they see it every day, but they get to go home after, right? They go home to their family and, mental illness gets to the back of their mind, but that doesn't happen for people with mental illness. So I think if you have the ability, I encourage people to read part 1 with as few breaks as possible, going into the idea that when I was going through this, I couldn't put my life down and go pause,
Yeah.
right? Like I had no choice but to keep going. And so I think a lot of people have told me that they can't do that it's too hard. They need to put it down and like take a break, which is fine. I understand. And then I have other people who tell me that, the book, just they sat and read the first 100 pages in one sitting because they couldn't stop reading. So I think it depends a lot on your personality and what works for you. But I think anybody can get something out of the book, no matter how much experience you do or don't have with mental illness.
Mhm. Liz, what you said is so powerful about being able to take a break and not being able to take a break. And I think that's such an important way to consume that book, knowing that now, right? Something that I was also thinking about as I was reading the book is oftentimes we expect a book to have some sort of neat and tidy, concise, sometimes positive ending, right? And the reality of living with severe mental illness is it's forever, right? There are going to be there are going to be many, many more chapters in your life and in your book. And I really wondered as I was reading it, what approach you would take, and are you going to try and find this positive spin or outlook for solace for your those reading your book, or are you going to stay in the midst of what is probably still very real everyday experience for you? And I won't spoil what you just actually did. But I think that's something that is so powerful about what you said about that ability to take a step back, or that ability to go home, that those who don't experience severe mental illness will never actually be able to understand. But you are allowing people a snapshot into that, which is extraordinarily powerful and useful. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you hope readers can take away from your book? And I'll stop there. That's a good enough question.
So I think there's a lot of things that I would like people to take away from the book. And we're going to finish this call and I'm going to think of 5 more.
Yes.
So that's just the way my brain works. I think one of them is to never take somebody doing something as attention seeking,
Mm,
because like that whole concept, just makes no sense, right? Like behavior is communication.
yeah.
Somebody's doing what you might call, and I've got my air quotes here, attention seeking, but there's a reason why that's happening. And in my case, without giving away too much, unfortunately, the medical system decided that I was attention seeking and completely ignored a whole bunch of my symptoms for years. But I think that it's important that people, especially like clinicians, not get stuck on these negative kind of views of clients. Oh, she's attention seeking. Oh, she's just over emotional, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not helpful to look at things from a negative perspective. It's much more helpful to look at things from a positive. And I don't mean like toxic positivity, like everything's wonderful, but like something that you can approach.
Yeah.
Right. You can't address somebody being called attention seeking. There's not something that you can do to address that, right? But somebody's saying that, this person is reaching out for help, or this person is showing that they're distressed. All these things is something that you can work on.
Mm.
So I guess what else from the book? I want people to understand from the hearing loss point of view more about cochlear implants and what that process is like for somebody to go through it, to lose your hearing, to learn a whole new language, American Sign Language, and then get implants and suddenly having to relearn to hear. I think that a lot of people could really find that really interesting, just because it's such a different experience than most people will ever go through.
Mm. This is a curveball question, so feel free to dodge it.
Okay.
But you shared with us both your hearing loss and your cochlear implant, and your lived experience with severe mental illness. How do you feel like these lived experiences of disability have impacted your role as an occupational therapist in terms of like your perspective when you're working with others?
So that's an interesting question. I think that my experience with both of these disabilities really, it makes me more empathetic. And I'll give you an example. So in Ontario, we have a program that can help fund wheelchairs, and you're only supposed to get a new wheelchair every 5 years. Okay. And so I had this client, and he had a wheelchair that was a 1.5 years old, and he hated it.
Mm.
Like, this is a guy with, a severe injury, and he was spending all his time in bed because he hated his wheelchair so much. And everybody else had told him, no, you have to wait till 5 years. And I said, no, like, that's, I can't imagine being told that I have to work with broken ears for the next 5 years, right? So I push and push, and it took a year, but we were able to get him a new wheelchair. And the first day he said he was up for like 7 hours, and he was just going around outside, and he was just so happy with it. And just the life change that, helped him, because I understand what it's like to rely on an assistive device.
Mm. Wow. That's really powerful. And as an OT, I understand how much work that was on your part. And I think that is really telling of the kind of therapist you are.
Thank you.
And I also can see how you being able to imagine living without that assistive device makes it that much more important or critical that another person doesn't have to go through that. So,
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Really nice. Okay, so I think our other question we had for you are like, what are some ways you feel like occupational therapy as a profession could better evolve to meet the needs of neurodivergent folks?
So that's a good question. And it's a hard one.
Yeah.
Because it's such a broad and diverse group.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
I think that as OTs, we're very holistic. And I think that we're in a good position to lead the movement towards like neuroaffirmative and being accepting of neurodivergence, not necessarily being something bad or wrong, but just being different.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And so I think we're in a really good place to be doing that and to be influencing that. I think that as occupational therapists, we really stick to the values of our clients. And I think that's especially important that in the neurodivergent population, that we're paying attention to their values and their interests and not pushing our own, even subconsciously, onto somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we're in a good position to kind of basically lead the way into helping this transformation occur, in the setting of whether you want to call it medical or schools or hospitals.
Yeah. Do you think there's other health professionals in general that potentially need more involvement in kind of this subset category of neurodivergent folks and kind of be just more educated?
I don't know that I want to comment on that, only because I don't think I'm educated enough to form an educated opinion on that.
Yeah.
So I'll give you that one as a little bit of a what did you say? Dodge. I'll dodge that one a little.
Fair. It was out of left field and a good point.
Yeah. Respect too. I think so often we, myself included, are quick to answer. And I think it takes an insightful and self-aware person to be able to like, no, I don't think I have the answer for that one. And that's a legitimate answer. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. So a couple more questions. What do you wish, and maybe we've kind of already answered this, so I don't know if there's anything else you want to add here, but what do you wish more I guess, neurotypical people understood about neurodiversity or what it's like being neurodivergent?
So my first answer to that is that neurodivergent is not just autism and ADHD. Right. My second answer to that is that people who are neurodivergent can't, as we were saying earlier, pause and step away. Right? Like that's your 24/7.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes people can forget that when they can pause and walk away from something, and to kind of picture what it's like, 24/7 to be in that state. And I think that if we look at that, going back to the question before about how can occupational therapists help, I think that that's something that we as occupational therapists can really use to our advantage isn't the right word, but use to help progress what we're doing with the clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Curveball, but I don't think you'll be mad about this one. When we started talking before we were recording, you were telling us about your dog. And I think that's
Yeah.
another, like, it sounds like probably core part of your identity and your support system. So I was wondering if you could like just tell us a little bit about your dog and what she does for you.
Sure. So I have a hearing service dog. She came to me trained through a foundation. I got her in July, so about a little over 8 months ago. She is a golden lab cross, and she is beautiful, if I do say so.
Sure.
She's currently sitting in my spot on the couch, listening to me do this webinar or this podcast.
Mhm.
She helps me with sounds primarily around the house, but she also helps me out in the community. So in the house, she tells me about sounds that I wouldn't ordinarily hear. So somebody at the door waking me up in the morning, the dryer going off, the oven timer going off, the microwave going off, the fire alarms, somebody's calling my name, like all those sounds that I don't hear unless I'm specifically listening for them. So having her kind of gets me the ability to turn off and relax a little bit because I'm not always listening for what's the next sound.
Mm.
Outside of the house, she comes with me, and a lot of people are very confused as to what she does outside. And that I get that, that's legitimate, right? You're used to seeing dogs do tasks outside of the house. So what she does for me is, by being aware of her, I can get environmental awareness. So if we're walking through a parking lot and a car alarm goes off and she looks to the left and back, I know that's where the car alarm is going off from. Or maybe she looks behind me because there's somebody behind me with a cart.
Mm.
Or I find at the grocery store is a big one. When I have her, if I'm accidentally blocking an aisle because I don't notice, people are more patient with me when I have her with me because they can see that there's a reason why I'm not responding to them saying, excuse me. And then of course she turns and looks at them to say, excuse me, and I become aware of her looking, and then I become aware of the person back there, and I can be like, oh, sorry, and get out of their way. But so it's a lot of like environmental awareness and things that you don't see unless you're the one who's in tune with her. So that's why it's really important not to distract service dogs, because just because it doesn't look like they're working doesn't mean that they're not.
Yeah.
And you could easily harm someone by distracting their dog. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing. Kind of wish she was sitting next to you, but you know what? I got a beautiful picture in my head of what she probably looks like. And yes, she is beautiful. So,
Yeah.
well, Liz, thank you so much for everything you shared with us so far today. I just want to let this be kind of an open-ended. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Anything else you'd like for us to ask you about?
I'll give you the opportunity to ask me any questions you want.
Mhm.
Mostly about the book,
Yeah.
but if there's anything else you're interested in, go for it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
open. I'm actually on video on this. Previously, up until now, I've been using like a profile, picture.
Mhm.
And just this last week, I decided that I was going to post my photo on my Facebook. So I decided that, it's okay. It's time to show my face. So that's got me with butterflies because
Yeah.
it's so different. But yeah, no, if you have any questions about the book or the hearing loss or the mental illness, like, go for it. I'm an open book. Literally, I have an open book.
Yeah.
Do you mind like shouting out the entire title, where you can purchase the book, all that good stuff?
Sure. So the book is called Resilient: Surviving My Mental Illness. It's available on Amazon, and there's also an audiobook on Audible
Mhm.
that I narrated myself. So you can get to hear me trying not to cry as I read the book
Mhm.
out loud. But it's available ebook, Kindle Unlimited, paperback, audiobook. I would love to hear what people think about it. My email is lizgraceauthor@gmail.com. It's in the back of the book for the newer copies. If you do read the book, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review, even, just, pick a star number or something. That really helps get the word out there to other people that this is a book worth reading.
Mhm.
So I would really appreciate that. But yeah, if you want to contact me, it's lizgraceauthor@gmail.com. I do have a website. It's lizgraceauthor.com. And my Facebook and Instagram are both Liz Grace Author. So it's
Good.
hopefully easy to remember.
It's nice and simple. It keeps it consistent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like it.
And we'll link all of that in the show notes for sure. I do have one question or thought. I don't know if it's a question
Sure.
or a thought. We'll see how it comes out. But you mentioned that like typically you just use like a profile picture or the cover of your book when you're doing publicity things, and that this is the first time you're having the video to go along with it. So I feel like honored to be experiencing this with you, and I want to thank you for your honesty and transparency and for saying like I'm an occupational therapist with severe mental illness, because I know that's not easy to do, and it's something that is really, really scary. But we can only make change, and we can only work on reducing stigma through acts of bravery like this. And I thank you for that. As we've really built our company around being transparent about our lived experience as neurodivergent people who experience, you know, serious mental illness as well. And it's really, really scary to see how that would be received. And I've been so encouraged at the number of people who have responded so positively to it, and how it can kind of, I don't know, give other people the courage and strength to do the same. So thank you for that. It's not a question, I guess. Thank you. I didn't know where it was gonna go.
Yeah, no, and you're bang on. It's terrifying. It is. It really is. Part of me, has the pen name because of, stuff protecting my family, right? Like, it's my story, it's not their story. They don't need to be, Google searched by their name or something, right? But I forget where I was going with that. But in terms of the pen name, in terms of like fighting stigma, I still felt that I needed to put a pen name, and I hate to say it, but I do still feel like I have to worry about at a future, job or connection or somebody, somebody somewhere Googling my name and saying like, whoa, like we don't want to deal with this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an occupational therapist, right? Like it can be
Yeah.
somebody in an organization anywhere who has no understanding of mental illness who says, oh, this girl's written a book about being mentally ill, like we don't want to deal with that. And I know a lot of people tell me like that's not realistic. And I like to think it's not realistic, but I also have to remember that this is my rest of my life and you can't take anything off Google.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I went with the pen name for now. And it's actually really hard to come up with a pen name. I don't know if you've ever tried to do it, but I've got funny stories around it if you want one.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I'm curious. You piqued my interest. Now you have to explain. Sorry.
So when it comes to choosing a pen name, you want to make sure that it's not an author that you already has that name, right? You want to make sure that it sounds the right age. You can't do like, Gertrude or something for a 25-year-old. It just nobody would believe it. And you want to make sure that it sounds the right kind of ethnicity and but then here's the one that the real kicker is that you have to Google your name and Google it on Amazon, search it on Amazon, because you want to make sure you don't come up against something, like pornographic or something beside your name. You don't want that to come up. So you have to go through and like find all these names, and it's a lot harder than it looks. So coming up with this one, my little sister wanted the name Elizabeth in the book, and I told her no, she couldn't have it because I was doing Liz. So she had to choose a different one.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought all that went into that, but of course.
Oh my gosh, it is like you'd think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna choose whatever, but it's not that easy.
I can't imagine how many names you like thought were gonna be it, and then you type them into Google and get like kind of a horror. You're like, never mind. I don't want to be associated with that. How many you came across that occurred?
Yeah.
And you picked a good one because it's not, my assumption was not that it was a pen name when I first heard it. And also when you Google it, Liz Grace OT, like everything that comes up is about your book. And so you're doing a good job with publicity, and also there probably aren't that many other Liz Grace OTs out there. So.
Well, I was worried that there would be some Liz Grace OT and they would be, angry about the fact that now there's this book under the same name, but you can't predict everything, right? No. So
you sure can.
It is what it is, I like to say.
It is what it is.
But, it is what it is. So did you have any other questions like about the book or the hearing or the dog or?
Oh, we could probably ask all the questions about the dog.
Oh, I'm totally open to it. So go for it.
Like, what's her favorite thing to do because she's always working. I understand that. But like when she has time to relax and you can take off, I know they can't take off the hearing, but when you can relax on the couch and not have to worry, what's her favorite thing to do?
So I have set up in the basement, I have a big kind of open room in the basement that we use in the winter when it's really, really cold to play. So she's got like, this dog has so many toys, I can't believe it. But she got this squeaky kind of rubber knobby ball, and that's just squeak, 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 squeak. And I throw it and she brings back and squeak, squeak, squeak. And like she could do it forever. I think that's probably her favorite thing. That and dinner. She's definitely a dinner dog.
She sounds like my golden.
I'm surprised she didn't pop up at the word, actually.
Yeah, it's probably getting kind of close.
Yeah.
That time of day.
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 4 o'clock. We got an hour.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else?
I feel like I could ask so many questions, but I also want to be mindful of your capacity and your spoons. And we've already held you for an hour. So are you open for another question, or are you like, I'm ready to wrap it? Okay.
My day has been set up so that I had all the spoons for this.
Good.
Oh,
so glad. I did the same for myself. I'm not usually that compassionate about it, but I wanted to have time and space for this. So good.
Okay.
So something I guess I just want to comment on again, see if there's anything you wanted to add. And I guess trigger warning with this. This is about some stuff related to self-harm. But there was a line or a discussion, a section of your book that really stood out to me. And it was talking about self-harm as a coping mechanism. I believe the coping mechanism is what, and what I think is so such an important takeaway from that is that we often think of coping mechanisms as like this intentional thing that we have learned and practice and do to regulate and make ourselves feel better. I think what people don't often understand is those are not innate things. And they're not even always productive or positive things. Coping mechanisms are anything that our body does to help increase our sense of safety and ground us, right? And so you describing that as like the only coping mechanism you had at that time and never learned anything else. One, obviously that's really heavy and that's heart-wrenching, but that is also probably the experience of so many other people too. And I think can help so many people have empathy around that of like, you are doing the best you can to feel safe and to feel grounded in that moment. You are not doing this, like you said, to seek attention. And if you had a better, more effective way, do you think you would be doing that? Right. So I don't know. Do you have anything to comment on my observation?
Yeah. So I think you're right on. Coping mechanisms are not necessarily these pretty bubbly things that we've been taught that are positive and everybody wants to participate in, but coping mechanisms are anything that helps you get through the next minute, the next second, the next hour, the next day, whatever it is that gets you through. That's a coping mechanism. And sometimes these coping mechanisms that we use are not the greatest. And we need to learn, other ways in order to not harm ourselves or continue to harm ourselves. But I think it's important that we keep in mind, like I was saying, like they're not this bubbly, bucket of coping mechanisms that I know as OTs, we like to say toolbox.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. And I can see people saying coping mechanisms out of a toolbox, but there's so many other coping mechanisms that can come out from other places, and they're just not necessarily helpful in the way that we want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And kind of a connection I made, like thinking about the world of neurodiversity and I guess more specifically with autistic folks, oftentimes there's a lot of misunderstanding around stimming and stimming that results in self-injurious behavior. And I think there's oftentimes a lot of misnaming this as behavioral or attention seeking, when again, these are coping mechanisms to regulate and be able to make it through the next moment. And we don't choose to engage in self-injurious behaviors because we want to be doing that or because it is fun or because we think it's going to solve our problems. It's to survive. So until you have something else or can prevent from getting to that stage in the first place, like, of course, that's what it's going to be. So I don't know, just kind of making that connection there that so often we talk about these survival techniques and strategies as intentional and volitional and behavioral. And I think that's so destructive in like actually supporting people in their needs, because like you said, it is communication, and it's communication that we probably need support.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
I could go into, talking all about that, but it's probably not appropriate to talk about in depth on a neurodivergent podcast all about self-harm. But maybe somebody on a mental health podcast will find me. we
Yeah.
can talk about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've had a lot of people, say that about that part, that they didn't understand why people did it before. And reading that, they understood at least why I did it, because it's not necessarily that what I do is the same reason for everybody else,
Yeah.
but at least they understood why one person did it.
Mhm.
And for me, how I stopped doing it,
Yeah.
right? Because I don't self-harm anymore. I haven't in 18 years. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I think, kind of, this is nothing really to do with my book, but I'm going to see what you guys think anyway.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think there's a couple spots in the book where I describe the hospitals. And I can only imagine from the perspective of other people with neurodivergence, just how unsettling it must be. I mean, I know it was for me, but I can only imagine like for other people.
Yeah.
If you guys got that feeling or anything from the book.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was for me, probably the hardest part was like imagining myself in that environment. Like even just thinking about fire hospitalizations or like even appointments for myself for like physical medical issues. I mean, um, those environments, those settings are not set up to support and help regulate dysregulated neurodivergent nervous systems. And just being in that environment can be traumatizing in of itself. Just the environment, right? Just the amount and difference in sensory input, and then sometimes, like you had mentioned, the lack of sensory input and the switching between the overstimulated and the understimulated and how physically painful that can be. I think that was one of the most powerful parts of it. And Stephanie had kind of mentioned earlier, like, do you think there are other health professionals that could learn a thing or two? And I anticipate that this is kind of what she was getting at, right? Like in reading your book, having kind of a critical lens where like seeing like there are so many things that could have been done better in your hospitalizations. And I think that's probably true. And I think you would probably agree with it. But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I wish that there was, a better way. And I don't think we really have one yet. And it doesn't mean there isn't one, but I just don't think we have it yet. And I think that that's very difficult for people who are neurodivergent, because if you end up in these settings, right, like how are you supposed to get better when you're so dysregulated? And I mean, as OTs, we can help that. I know a lot of the mental health OTs in the hospitals and clinics and stuff use like sensory things. So that's great to hear.
Yeah. Now, we don't need to have all the answers, but I think you brought about an important look into what some of the issues are and continue to be, especially with like how recent your biography was, right? You released it at the end of 2022, right?
2023.
2023. Okay, so this is still
Yeah,
very
so June, July 2023. So about 8 months to go. I released it like a day before I got my dog.
Oh, wow. What a time in your life that must have been. A lot of big things all at once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if it's okay with you guys, I think we'll start wrapping this up. Even though like there are so many more thoughts and questions I have, but just for the sake of being respectful and mindful of all of our spoons and capacity, I think this was a beautiful talk. And
Thank you for having me. It
Oh,
was it was great questions, and I was glad to get to share. And hopefully the talk has helped some people out there.
absolutely.
Yeah, even if it's not like for people personally, I think it's if others just have a different insight, and also for personal things, with OTs that also experience some severe mental illnesses too, like being seen in your book is really wonderful. So
Mm, yeah.
Okay.
Well, give Meta some love for us,
Mm.
and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and are able to find some peace and spoons.
Thank you. You guys too.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Neurodivergent Voices. Interested in an interview? Email divergecs@gmail.com to get it scheduled.